Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of the lineup.
Yeah, welcome back. We're super excited for today's episode. We have on Marcus Alston. He was a Division I football player at St. Francis University up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Marcus and I connected a couple months back. He's going to talk a little bit about his high school career into his college career, how injury impacted his physical well being, but also his mental well being. And then he's going to go into his own organization called Alston for Athletes. It's a wellness company that's going to talk a little bit about the mental health side, physical health, and education, helping athletes get to a better point in their lives. So it's going to be really good. We're super excited for it, and yeah, can't wait. All right, and here's Marcus. Hey Marcus, how you doing?
Good, Ben. Thanks for having me on. How you guys doing?
Good. Welcome to the show here.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate you.
So, if you want to get started here, maybe just jump into a little bit about your career. Maybe start from high school into college. Talk us through your football journey.
Yeah, so I went to Mount St. Joseph High School in Baltimore, Maryland. I was getting recruited by several schools in the surrounding area. Ended up going to Mount St. Joe because many of the kids in my neighborhood, they were going there, so that's where I felt most comfortable. I was getting recruited to play quarterback, so my freshman year I was on the JV team. My sophomore year, I actually got an opportunity to play on varsity, but I actually declined because outside of sports, like I'm really into esports. So that season I kind of pursued esports outside of football as well. So then my junior year, I transitioned from going to quarterback to tight end just because we had a very good team that year. We were in a very tough conference, but we had, other quarterbacks that could play the position. So I told the coach, wherever you think, I can fit and help the team, I'm all about it. So I've always been good in space with the ball in my hand. So that's when we decided it would be best if I played tight end. And then my junior year, I had a very successful season. I had about 40 catches and about 400 yards and about 4 or 5 touchdowns, which was really good for me because, like I said, I was transitioning positions, and we also had 2 Division I receivers on our team at the time. One was going to Temple and one was going to Stony Brook. So being able to compete with those guys was just great. I was able to earn all MIAA honors, and I earned all state honors as well. So I began getting recruited by a lot of schools. To name a few: Maryland, Towson. My dream school was Florida. I was getting recruited by Virginia Tech, Virginia, a lot of the ACC schools. I was most likely going to go to Maryland. So, like I said, I was getting recruited by a lot of schools. I was going to a lot of camps this summer going up into my senior year. Was actually at College Park competing for a scholarship that day. If I would have performed very well, there's a high chance that I was going to get a scholarship. Was doing some one-on-one drills, and my foot got caught in the turf, and I just heard a pop in my foot. And I just couldn't walk. I couldn't do the 40-yard dash. I couldn't do any of the rest of the activities at the camp. So turns out I thought I had a sprain. I went to patient first, got an X-ray done on my foot, and I got a weight-bearing X-ray or non-weight-bearing X-ray. So essentially, because I had a stress fracture in my foot, I didn't know this at the time. In order for you to see the stress fracture in your foot, you actually have to put weight on it. And I didn't get an X-ray where you actually, put weight on your foot to kind of see the, stress fracture. So I had a misdiagnosed as a foot sprain. And the summer going into my senior year, I was just dealing with what I thought was a foot sprain, and turns out I had a broken foot. So I was not really doing a lot of running that summer, but we did have a lot of 7-on-7 camps that I participated in. And then I remember one camp, we played against Good Counsel, and they had Stephon Diggs on their team, who plays for the Buffalo Bills, and Kendall Fuller, who just won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs, who's back on with the Redskins. And at the end of that 7-on-7 camp, I just couldn't walk, and I just knew something was up at that point. Then I actually got a weight-bearing X-ray like I should have months prior, and turns out I had a stress fracture in my foot, and that I found that about a week or two going into like camp. So the season was coming up, and I had to sit out for about 6 weeks or so. So I missed 3 or 4 games. which was kind of tough. And I guess one thing that I kind of messed up on is, I really did it after that 6 weeks period was over. I was just ready to play. I was ready to compete for a scholarship. I wanted to go to play big time ball and, play at my dream school. And obviously that wasn't the smartest thing. And I think that my foot wasn't, fully healed from the stress fracture. And it was my senior homecoming game against Calvert Hall. I ran across the middle, and my foot was planted in the ground, and I kind of got hit high and low, and my body just kind of twisted, and my foot popped again. And I really couldn't walk at that point. I was crawling off the sideline. My coach is like yelling at me, "Get up." He's this big 6'8" guy, like used to play in the NFL. So he was pretty intimidating. And then I was just like, I'm fine. I'm going to come back. I'll be good. And, I got ice on my foot, and around halftime of the game, I took all the ice off my foot because I was ready to, go back in. And I look at my foot, and it's the size of a golf ball. I got bruising on the bottom of my foot, the side of my foot, the top of my foot. So that was my senior year. And October of my senior season is when I got surgery. I had suffered a Lisfranc fracture where I essentially tore the ligaments from my first and second metatarsal, and it caused my bones in my foot to shift over. So I had to get basically foot reconstruction surgery so they can reconstruct an arch in my foot. And then, so that was that kind of was when I really started to see a change, like in my mental, because, as a 17-year-old kid, I was at like the top of the world, getting recruited by some of my dream schools. And then that injury happened, and then I just didn't hear from those schools again. It's just part of the nature of, the business side of, sports. So it is what it is. But I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to play at St. Francis University up in Loretto, Pennsylvania. It's a small Division I AA program. So I went there. I had received 3 surgeries on my foot, believe it or not. I had one in October, like I said, of my senior year of high school. And then in February of my senior year of high school, I had to get the plates and screws taken out. And unfortunately, the surgery failed. So I had to get a third surgery where they actually took bone out of the heel of my took some bone out of my heel and fused it together between the first and second metatarsal, and then they just kept all the plates and screws in my foot. So I still have all that stuff in my foot today. But so I went to St. Francis, and I was still dealing with my foot injury. I was redshirted my freshman year, and so that was kind of tough on me as well. And then my sophomore year, I tore my labrum in my shoulder. And then my junior year of college is when I started to get acclimated in playing football again. So it took me about 2.5, 3 years to get back on the field again. And I was just playing behind a lot of guys that had been in the program, for years. I was still, getting adjusted to playing with, all this metal in my foot, shaking off a lot of this rust, and learning the playbooks and things like that. So that was kind of tough not being able to play. But my senior year, I had a bigger role in the team, and our starter went down. I was the backup tight end. So about halfway going into our conference play, I was basically the starting tight end for the rest of my senior year. And, kind of going back to my senior year at Mount St. Joe in high school, when I had the Lisfranc fracture. That was my senior homecoming game. In my senior homecoming game at St. Francis, I scored a touchdown and helped lead the team to a Division I championship. First one in school history. Yep.
That's a crazy story. I mean, we always talk about injuries and dealing with injuries, and I think Derek can relate a lot to what you went through. And Derek, do you want to expand a little bit on what you went through, what you see similarities between your story with Marcus?
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of had a similar story. I actually tore my ACL my senior year of high school right after I committed to play Division I golf at Towson. So kind of went through a similar journey. I ended up having 3 surgeries. A couple of them failed, and that really told on my mental health, as you started to touch on in your story. So I was kind of curious if you wanted to talk a little bit about your mental health journey. I know it kind of weighed on me, and there are a couple things I would have done differently, or I wish I could have gone back and changed. So if you wanted to talk a little bit about that for you.
Yeah, so for me, like I said, I started to see a change in my mental around my freshman year, like transitioning to going to up to St. Francis in Pennsylvania. Obviously, I was under a lot of, high pressure, me being the first person in my family to go to a 4-year school, um, and just being away from my family, dealing with the third injury. And I had also lost my grandmother, who was my closest relative at the time. So that, like I said, that really put me in a dark place, and I started to see a change in my mental. Um, I didn't really go to like any of my labs. I found myself sleeping, hours at a time. My freshman year, I didn't go to like any football activities, and eventually, my grades began to suffer. And then I was on academic probation, and at that point, I really knew something needed to be done at that point. So I began to start seeking counseling up at St. Francis, for several months until my mind state got a little bit better, and I got on antidepressants and things like that.
Okay, so expanding on like the mental health point and your injury and dealing with that, because a lot of people think physical injuries just oh, that stinks, you're out of football, you're out of your sport, that could really take a toll on you physically, you're not in the weight room. But not a lot of people think about the mental health side of that and what the implications could be with your mental health. I know that even with a small injury, I've dealt with patella tendonitis in my knees for a few years now, since freshman year of college. And even just small injuries like that, nagging injuries, can have a direct impact on your mental well-being and getting on the field, because it can be frustrating. You're at that high point in your life, you're getting recruited by all these schools, you're living life large, you're kind of the big man on campus at your high school, I'm sure, getting those scholarship opportunities, and then something like this happens. And I know that you talk about positive psychology a little bit in your own story, and the impact positive psychology can have on you. Can you expand a little bit further on that, maybe, and talk a little bit about how you got through that time?
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest thing was my friends, really. I don't think I really understood what I was dealing with, and I don't think they understood as well. So, and just with them being in my presence was the most like meaningful thing to me, and just really appreciating like the small things, and the moments that we have together. I think that's really what helped me. And first was just really kind of dropping my ego at the door, because I just feel like with us being athletes, we deal with all these high pressures, and we have to live up to these big expectations. So sometimes we, see it as weakness if we like ask, for help, essentially. And I don't really see it as that, because us as athletes, we're, regular people as well. So we go through the same things, and that's some things that people don't quite understand. So for me, it was kind of tough to have like positive psychology during that time, because like I said, I didn't quite understand what I was really dealing with. Especially me being so young and not really knowing about mental health. But St. Francis also did a really good job with my coaches helping and supporting me, as well as the athletic department. So um, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of went through, kind of experienced a similar situation with my story. It's like I felt like I was almost blindsided by it. Like I didn't really feel well equipped for how to deal with it. Maybe because it wasn't a big topic of discussion when it happened. Partially my own fault as well. Do you
Hmm.
feel like if you would have been more educated about mental health, or if that was more a part of everyday life, part of educating that, maybe this would have gone a little differently for you?
Definitely. I think personally, I think it kind of stems back to generational, curses, and some of the things that our parents dealt with growing up, and like how that environment that you were brought up under essentially like plays effect on you, later on. in life. So, um,
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Go ahead,
I
bud.
mean, I know that with families and parents and family and, brothers, sisters can have a direct impact on that. And I think it's not really the generation's fault, the older generation's fault, because that just wasn't talked about much when
exactly.
of 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. This whole topic was not talked about much at all. So even though, there's still strides we have to take, we're definitely getting better and realizing that, it's not embarrassing. It's not, you shouldn't be ashamed to talk about your mental health. You shouldn't be ashamed to say that I need to talk to somebody. I need to go to help right now. That's something that everybody should do.
Definitely. And that's what I was saying. Like, I just think that the parents, they just weren't really educated on those matters. So I just think that our generation is supposed to be more educated and bring light to these matters and, provide, better mental health overall for the future, generation of, people, student athletes, so.
Yeah, I was curious. This is kind of something I noticed going through my physical rehab. I kind of found a disconnect within athletics between the resources provided to you when you're uh, recovering from a physical injury as opposed to a mental injury. So I was curious if you found a similar situation during your rehab process.
Yeah, there definitely was some disconnect because St. Francis, it's really small, so the resources are limited. So when I was dealing with rehabbing my foot, um, I was working with the physical therapist that didn't work with like the athletic department essentially. They were in the health science department, so they were like physical therapists, for more for like the school because we had local people in the area get physical therapy at our school. So I didn't really work with too much like with athletics. So I think there needs to kind of be like a mediator or just someone that kind of or like a liaison between the athletic department and the physical therapy department. So I firmly believe that in order to kind of help with this situation, that at least the physical therapist should be certified in youth mental health first aid, because maybe some of the coaches don't understand the symptoms and the signs of anxiety and depression because they're not with the student athlete that much because they're times dealt with rehabbing. And so what they need to do is get youth mental health first aid, what I believe, because the physical therapist, they can essentially be able to diagnose, not diagnose, but help with crisis situations and be able to see some of the symptoms within anxiety and depression. And then at that point they can kind of like work with the staff and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's a really great point you made there. I know that there needs to be, in my opinion, there definitely needs to be a connection with the physical training staff, the athletic trainers, and then the therapists from the counseling centers. I know that a lot of people at our school will go to the athletic trainers, but let's say that if you're going through a mental health challenge, it's a lot harder to walk through those counseling center doors than to walk into the trainer's room. And we really need to, bridge that gap because it's the same thing in my opinion. It doesn't matter if if you have a physical injury, you go to the athletic trainer. If you aren't dealing with something mentally, you go to a counselor. But for some reason, there's almost that shame and that stigma attached to going to that counseling center rather than going to the trainer's room, as if there's something worse about that situation than your physical injury, which I think that this could really bridge the gap what you're talking about.
No, definitely. Yeah, it's a tricky situation because St. Francis, like I said, they did have good resources, but they were limited, and the counseling services weren't involved with athletics. So maybe, and this is something that I want to talk to them about, like in the near future, is just like helping with just mental health, like policy in the school, is just to provide them, you know better resources on the student athlete side of mental health. Like, you have the counselors, but that's kind of for more so the general student population. But if they don't have any sports psychologists or people who deal with athletics, because for me, it was really tough to balance and really get my mental health where it needs to be, because in 2016 there was a national college health assessment taking, and the average Division I football player has an 80-hour work week between classes, lifting, traveling, and all the things that you need to do. So it just puts you even under more stressors. So definitely trying to bridge that gap. It's something that, I want to work towards in the near future, because I do have some physical therapists on my team, and I know that in the near future, as I continue to grow what I'm doing, that my physical therapist will be youth mental health first aid certified.
Yeah, I mean, you started to touch on it a little bit there. Do you want to talk a little bit about the organization you started, kind of what your goals are, what you see it building into, and what you're up to now with it?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm starting Alston for Athletes. It's a sports mentoring program, and I'm looking for current student and former student athletes who have a unique story, who have overcome, mental challenges, personal challenges, injuries, and have played sports in, college. And we want to train you in youth mental health first aid and get trained by some of the other psychologists that we have on our team. And then we will pair you with a kid in a school system. With my organization, I plan on partnering with school systems across the country and pairing, student athletes who are struggling with a mentor like myself and you guys. And that's kind of the gist of the program. It's a strong mental health emphasis, and then I want to expand into the student athlete development, where you can kind of help with academic assistance, teach them things on like financial literacy, help them with their goals. And then I want to expand into the physical development side of things, where we kind of help with nutrition, where we help with physical development as well. So essentially what I want to do with Alston for Athletes is create a wellness center to in-house all these services. So, you don't go from your physical therapy appointment, drive 30 minutes to go to your strength training, and then go 30 minutes to go to your tutoring session. All those, services essentially are going to be there. So, it's the ease of access for all student athletes. So right now I'm working on growing the mentor base. So I'm trying to network with current and former student athletes. I'm also launching an ambassador program where we want to empower other current and former student athletes, where we'll share your story on our platform, and you'll kind of advocate for the program, and we'll just kind of get you to put some content out there, whether that be in the form of blogs and vlogs. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing is revolved around a lot of policy making and agreements, so that I can get a lot of this stuff in formal documentation for the people that want to volunteer and my board members. And then I hope in the coming months I can file for my 501c3 status, and then really start to get the ball rolling, hopefully next school year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited to see how that mentor program rolls out. We kind of did a similar, slightly different thing at Towson this past fall. We rolled out a mentorship program, but it paired upperclassmen with underclassmen in athletics. So slightly different, but we really saw the power that came out of that, of building relationships and really having someone to trust and that you can share stuff with. And that was awesome to see. So I'm super excited to see how that rolls out for you, especially with having athletes who kind of went through it already and working with younger kids who maybe haven't gone through those experiences yet, and see how that works out for them.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. Hope I can get you guys involved in any way.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, this seems like Alston for Athletes is the first of its kind. I know that there's a lot of places you can go. You go to the gym to get physically strong. You can go to a tutor, but it seems like what you're doing is you're combining all these aspects of mental wellness, physical wellness, just overall wellness, and you're bringing it all together into one location where athletes can really build all their skill sets and what they need to be successful in their sport, but also to be successful in life and later in life when sport ends.
Yep.
I think another big thing is, we talked a lot about on the last episode and throughout this whole series, we're going to be talking about self-identity and kind of what your life is after sports and what that looks like. And I think it's awesome to hear your story like this. And, the football season came to an end and that moved on. And now you built up an organization like this. And that's kind of what you found passion in and what you love. And I think that's awesome to see kind of you find that identity after sport, which is something we talk a lot about.
Yeah, man. And I'm not gonna lie, I struggled with that for a pretty long time because I had graduated from St. Francis I finished December 2017. I graduated in May of 2018. I started working full time February 2018 doing IT stuff. And I was in a relationship at the time, long distance, wasn't the best on my mental health. And that's kind of where I like had my identity crisis, is because like all my friends were still at school. I was going through a breakup. Um, and I wasn't really sure like if I loved like IT that much. Yeah, it's like a passion of mine, but I don't think it's like my purpose in life. And that's when like I really found out about my diagnosis, and I had a very powerful experience spiritually. And I tried to be introspective of the circumstances that I've been given. And then that's when I really found that my purpose in life is helping give back to student athletes similar to me.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like you almost had an epiphany there where, you thought of what your life would look like. And I'm sure what you thought of going into college and even at the end of college isn't what you're doing now. It sounds like you wanted to do IT. And that's interesting to show, that even though you have a set goal in college, sometimes you just find it later, a little bit later. And that's okay too, to find your passion after, kind of still find your way. You don't have to find your way in college to be successful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's my advice to anyone listening is like, if you're struggling to find your identity, that's okay. Like, just remain patient. And I'm a firm believer in, just faith. If you're not super religious, at least, believe in yourself. And eventually, you'll find that purpose. But I've always learned that everyone's just like on their own time. So you just got to be patient.
Yeah, one final question from me here. We kind of like to use this platform to share advice and kind of give advice to people out there who are maybe going through similar situations. So, what advice would you say you give to, whether it be football, baseball, golf, any sport out there, but someone who's maybe dealing with injury or dealing with a mental health journey, what advice would you give to them out there?
Yeah, the first thing is dropping your ego. Kind of like I said previously, we're all human. We're not, Superman. So, dropping your ego and realizing that, okay, yeah, like I may have a problem. And then once you realize that you have a problem and that you need to seek assistance, I think that's the big first step that you need to take. And then just kind of be open about things, instead of just bottling everything up. Just try to kind of advocate for, mental health, put your story out there, talk to your coaches, use some of the resources on your campus. Open Mind Gym's a great resource. The Hidden Opponent's a great resource, and Alston for Athletes will be a great resource for student athletes. So there's going to be plenty of resources, here in the near future. So, you know, come find us if you're struggling. We got people that are willing to help you. We got people that have powerful experiences that want their voices heard, and we want your voice to be heard.
Yeah, exactly. With Open My Gym, we open our platform up to Q&As, to interviews, to get those athlete stories out. Because although we talk about it as much as we can, we need everyone who's had a story to feel comfortable talking about it. And that's the point of our advocacy work, is to get people to feel like they can share their story without feeling shame or feeling nervous, kind of just putting it out there, letting people know, hey, you're not alone. You can get through this. And there's a lot of great platforms out there that can help you do that.
Yeah, no, there's, like I said, with mental health just really starting to scratch the surface. In the future, there's going to be more and more resources, more wraparound care for people struggling. So we're pretty close. We'll definitely get there, but my whole philosophy is just not trying to compete with, other mental health organizations, like as a, opposed to just, why not collaborate together? Why not, do this together? It's not like Marcus Alston is going to solve, mental health for student athletes. I'm not going to just do that myself. I'm going to do it with people like, Ben, Derek, and then these other, student athletes and these other, mental health organizations.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this grow kind of as the biggest trend in sports and, in the world in general right now. And I think we're close and we're not there yet, but we're really close to breaking through here. And, I'm really excited to see where your organization goes and all of us working together kind of see us change the conversation and kind of change the overall perception of mental health, especially within sports.
For sure, man. We can definitely do this.
Yeah, as cliche as it sounds, I always say, two heads are better than one. I know that's a cheesy thing and that's a cheesy talking point, but it is really true. It's a really true statement because there's a lot of groups doing small things and have their own goals, and that's great. But this is a field where there needs to be no competition. This is a field where everybody needs to be on the same page, working together and figuring out collaboratively how we can make this better.
Agreed, man. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome. Well, this was great, Marcus. We really thank you for coming on the show here, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Likewise. Appreciate you, Ben and Derek. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks, you too.
Yeah, you too, Marcus.
All right.
And that was Marcus Alston from Alston for Athletes.
Yeah, Marcus tells a great story about persevering through injury and really finding your self-identity after sport, which is something we talk a lot about on this episode.
Yeah, I think another great point that he talks about is bridging that gap between the athletic trainer to the counseling center and what we can do to kind of destigmatize both in a way where athletes can feel just as comfortable going to the counseling center as going to the athletic trainer. And I think that was a great talking point that he discussed. So moving forward, we're going to have Ian Johnson come on next Sunday. And I'm super excited for Ian to come on the podcast. I've known him now for about half a year, and he came to Washington College for an open mind gym event. He talked about his own OCD, his own career. He actually went to Oak Hill. He played with Carmelo Anthony there, and he was the starting center in the game where Carmelo Anthony played LeBron, where they had that huge game on ESPN. It's really cool. He'll talk about that a lot. That's actually a funny story. And then he'll talk about his career at Davidson. He'll talk about his career overseas. And then he'll go on to discuss his book and what he thought about OCD and his own perseverance story.
Yeah, super excited for that. So be on the lookout for that next Sunday. And thanks for listening, everyone.
All right, bye, guys.